Stop. I'm not gonna let you guys watch this without commenting it. When I test integrated GPUs, people often comment the videos with, "Oh Hubwood, you have to assign more VRAM to the iGPU, the standard 512 megabytes aren't enough." And because of my experience in the past, I was always like, "Oh no, you don't. It doesn't make a difference, since if the VRAM is too small, the laptop will automatically use more of the free regular RAM as VRAM. And since it's the same RAM physically, in theory, it won't make any difference whatsoever." But is that really true? Or have I been wrong in that case? I've actually been asking my followers that same question, and they have actually been kind of divided about the answer as shown here. So we need to talk about that. Okay, since I wanted to make a video about this topic for a while, and I'm currently testing a laptop with a brand new Ryzen 5 7460HS, which has the new RDNA 3 RX 760M as integrated graphics, I thought, well, let's do it. So in the BIOS of this Lenovo LOQ 15 laptop, which has 16GB of DDR5 5600 MHz RAM, I was able to choose between 512 MB, 1TB and 2TB as pre-allocated VRAM. And so I tested all three configurations in some recent games. Let's have a look. Before we start, I double and triple checked all of today's results.
So in Assassin's Creed Valhalla on high settings at 1080p, I actually saw that with each setting, the average FPS actually raised by 1 FPS. And I really ran these tests multiple times to make sure it's not a margin of error. But the results have been very consistent. It didn't seem to affect the frame times as well, and the 1% lows have been kinda similar according to the benchmark, though they were a bit better on the higher VRAM settings. Okay, so maybe that was just this game. Must be bad programming or something. So let's have a look at Cyberpunk 2077 at medium settings instead. Okay, here the difference was smaller, to a degree which could be declared as a margin of error, and the performance even dropped a bit when switching from 2 to 4GB of VRAM allocation. The frame times seem to be pretty consistent as well. And since Cyberpunk 2077 is pretty hungry considering both RAM and VRAM, this has to prove it doesn't matter, right? Right? And Far Cry 6 on high settings was giving me very similar results. The average FPS didn't change at all, and the total rendered frames in the benchmark run have been super close as well, once again. So victory, I thought. But then I fired up Forza Horizon 5 at high settings and, well, you can see it for yourself. The difference was there once again. A pretty clear gap of up to 11.6% actually, in a game that actually isn't that demanding.
Okay, so I guess at this point I really have to apologize to you and admit that I was wrong about my statement that VRAM size for iGPUs would not matter. But before you start writing, "I told you so," let's continue with two more games first.
In Hogwarts Legacy, something weird happened. Between 0.5 and 1 GB of allocation, I only saw a consistent difference of 1 FPS. But with the 2 GB settings, the frame times really went to hell, despite the average FPS being even 7.5% higher. But somehow, the now only 14 GB of free regular RAM seemed to be an issue for this game. And then again, Hogwarts Legacy is known to be troublesome in both RAM and VRAM aspects. The game basically can't get enough of both of them. And in The Last of Us, we saw a result that was pretty similar to the Assassin's Creed Valhalla one. 1 additional FPS per VRAM level. Well, again, seems like I was wrong. I mean, I proved it myself, it was undeniable, and no matter if it should be like that, the fact that it is like that means my statement was just wrong, at least for some games.
But what if we increase the RAM size to 32 GB? In that case, there should always be enough RAM as regular RAM for the VRAM, right? Right? So I installed two 16GB sticks of DDR5 5600 MHz RAM, which had better timings, by the way, so it makes no sense to directly compare these results with the 16GB ones, I'm sorry. And with the 32 GB of VRAM, I was actually able to set 4 GB as the pre-allocated VRAM size, which I did because the more, the merrier.
But now with the 32 GB installed in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the difference was marginal. even smaller than with the 16GB setup, so I wondered if my statement was kinda right after all, if a game has enough RAM to choose from after all. Maybe Windows isn't assigning the free RAM correctly as VRAM when it doesn't have enough gigabyte to satisfy both of them. But now in contrast to the 16GB run, in Cyberpunk 2077 the difference was a bit bigger and pretty consistent. I know these numbers are close and really scream margin of error, but it was pretty exactly 1 to 1.5 FPS difference in each run every time. So that can't be a coincidence. It will run slightly better with the 4GB pre-allocated. In Far Cry 6, the difference was now clear as well, despite not being present at all in the 16GB run. 3 FPS more, which is 7.5% in this case. That's a clear, yes, I would like that, sir. Well, but why is that? Actually, it makes no sense in theory. With 32GB of RAM, no matter how much VRAM a game needs, there should always be enough spare RAM for the iGPU to use as VRAM if it needs it. Then again, in Forza Horizon 5, the difference was smaller than with the 16GB setting, which is again pretty confusing, as actually most of this video was for me while recording, scripting and editing it really. And I also tested God of War with the 32GB setting, and again I saw a small uplift in FPS, which is nothing you would notice in reality, but still, we could of course take it as it comes for free, right? 2.5 FPS are 2.5 FPS, that is undeniable. But then in Red Dead Redemption 2 there was no difference at all. In fact, in 3 test runs, the 0.5GB setting was a tiny bit faster than the 4GB allocation. I mean, this clearly all seems like some games just aren't optimized in a way that they would be able to get the full performance themselves, without being helped with more pre-allocated VRAM. You know what I mean? And actually take a look at the displayed VRAM size in Red Dead Redemption 2. It seems to be all over the place and not correctly displaying the VRAM size. It's always around 100 megabytes, so something was weird here. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider and 32GB, the difference was pretty small, but it was there once again. It's only 1 FPS on high settings, maybe 2 to 3 on medium or low, but it's there. And in The Last of Us, anybody would take 2 extra FPS for sure, as this game is hardware hungry as well, as we all know. And again, it's a difference, small but undeniable. While doing some research for this video, I actually stumbled upon a video by the channel Filterless, which tested the Asus ROG Ally with both 4GB and 8GB of integrated RAM as VRAM for the AMD Z1 Extreme. So check that one out, I will link to it in the description. Because it turns out that in most cases the settings of 8GB of VRAM is actually improving the performance by a few % as well. But in BioShock Remastered, Dirt Rally 2 and The Division 1 the performance actually dropped a bit. But these then again are older titles. Which again seems to me like it has to do with the game's engine and optimization. He also measured the 1% low and 0.1% low FPS, which mostly changed equivalent to the average FPS, whereas in Call of Duty he actually saw basically unplayable 1% low FPS and experienced a lot of stuttering with the 4GB setting. Which is weird because the 8GB would only leave 8GB of regular RAM for Call of Duty and the ROG Ally by itself, and from my experience Call of Duty Warzone will not work right with only 8GB of regular RAM. I have actually made a dedicated video about that a while ago, and like thousands of people reported the same experience back to me, so I'm really left a bit confused here.
Now, when I was testing the RX 680M back in the day and the RX 780M a few weeks ago, people were asking me to increase the pre-allocated VRAM, which was not possible since these laptops that I've tested, the iGPUs with, did not allow that option in the BIOS. So it's just fair that I did not repeat the comparison of these cards with the RX 760M and more VRAM. But I have clearly been wrong about my statement in the past, and I am sorry for that. And it doesn't really matter that in theory it should not have made a difference, since in fact it does. I mean, it's clearly not a huge issue, like if a dedicated GPU has only 512 megabytes of VRAM, because in that case the performance would be horrible. No recent game can run on 512 megabytes of VRAM in a dedicated GPU anymore, no matter how fast the GPU is in theory. Because the switch to the regular RAM of the laptop or the desktop PC would always be the bottleneck. This would always make games unplayable, so we cannot compare this scenario one by one, and the behavior is different. And in the case of iGPUs, it's clearly an issue of the optimization of how Windows or the games access the RAM, but still, I was proven wrong in quite some games, and again, I'm sorry about that. And now you can give me your "I told you so" comments. I really deserve them. Of course, all of this could be different for, let's say, Intel Iris Xe graphics or AMD's RDNA 2 chips or on desktop CPUs. So I might repeat this test in the future with a different setup. Oh, and by the way, I'm also going to make a similar version of this video without the commenting section and only showing the comparison side by side with a classic side-by-side thumbnail as well, since a lot of people prefer that, I guess, and would not click on the thumbnail of this video. But I will release that silently without informing my subscribers. So the other version will be for the poor bastards that aren't subscribed to my channel yet and accidentally stumble upon it on YouTube instead. What? You're not subscribed yet? Alright, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and tschüss.